My guest today, Bill Stewart.
Right.
Call sign KF6RMK, who has a past career as an advertising executive.
Yeah, that's not entirely true. I'm an ad man, and I'm called an art director. And we're the ones that they call us the architect of the page. So we develop the look and the feel of the actual ad.
In popular culture, we hear the term madman. Is that the correct term, or is it ad man or madman?
Admin back in the 50s were, you know, kind of wild guys. And so I think that term came from the TV series, but a lot of the guys I knew were madmen, and some of the execs were rather crazy acting. They were sort of the privileged class. They dressed well, they wined and dined clients, and the agency I worked for, I started up in Seattle, and their main client was Olympia Beer. Being near the area of Boeing aircraft, we did some high-tech avionics and things like that.
Was your career particularly stressful?
Very. Mainly because of deadlines. It was constant deadlines. And there's very little time to come up with the super creative ad concept. You know, you had to get together with writers and account executives and come up with a concept for that year. And it had to be done within, you come up with a concept within a week and present it to the client. And then from then on you had to turn it around quickly. It had to be correct. It was going to go into national magazines, and it had to be perfect. So there was a lot of stress.
Wow.
Because of the deadlines.
Wow. So what kind of medium would you use? What kind of media did you typically use when you were doing that?
Well, back in the 60s, I was young in the business then. It was mostly magazines, billboards. Television was coming into its own, and newspaper. Newspaper was a big medium back then. But it was mostly national magazines like Look and Life magazine, where they had big pages. You know, those magazines were large. You know, I don't know how big they were, but they were big pages.
Right.
And we used pastels, which was an interesting medium, but we could simulate photographs and illustrations with these pastels. And then the new invention came on was magic markers. So we used a lot of magic markers. We had a big set of colors that we could use and use. When I was still in art school, they were using watercolors in some of the New York agencies, and they would just, you know, do the illustration on a piece of watercolor paper, and it'd get all wrinkly from the water. But that's the way they'd present it. But anyway.
Where did you go to school?
LA Art Center School of Design.
Oh, wow.
And that was, started out in Hollywood. They're in Pasadena now. They do ad design, fashion design, automotive design, product design. It was a good school, one of the best in the country.
Was there any overlap between ham radio and your career?
Not really. I was fascinated with the equipment the sound guys were using. They'd carry these beautiful little tape recorders called Nagras that would record professional sound on a miniaturized tape recorder.
Was there any other peers that you worked with that were into ham radio?
No, it was rare. Actually, I think ham radio is an antithesis to art. You know, there's no connection there other than building. You know, building is kind of a artistic skill. But
Were you building kits back then?
Well, when we were first married, my wife and I both built a Heathkit hi-fi set, and that was fun. You know, putting all the components together, and we worked as a team. But that was about it. That's where it ended.
The TV series Mad Men portrays advertising executives as bad people in a lot of ways. One scene in the first episode shows the family going on a picnic and leaving all their trash behind. This show weighs heavily on consumer society and depicts ad executives as boozing and womanizing. Do you feel this is a fair depiction?
Well, let's see. Let me put it this way. I think it's a little amplified on TV, and they were depicting like a New York ad biz, and they've always had a little bit of that reputation. Yeah, womanizing a little bit, but not like on TV. That's overblown, I think. But maybe some of the New York agencies were that way. But they always knew how to have a good time, and that was the era of the 3 martini lunch. Everybody went out and had three or four martinis. I had problems with that because when I got back to the office, I couldn't work, so I knocked it off.
Were there others in the office that would drink in the office?
Well, not really. Not like you see on TV. They didn't have a bottle in their desk drawer. None of that. They had a bar maybe in the agency where you could go and have a drink after work. But it wasn't a lot of, snorts out of the desk drawer. And we did have a refrigerator stocked with Olympia beer because that was our client. But it was always after work. After 5 o'clock, we'd go have a cool one.
I know that public relations has a big tie-in for advertising agencies, and that Edward Bernays was the pioneer in this industry. He combined the ideas of crowd psychology and the psychoanalytical ideas of his uncle Sigmund Freud. He is famous for his Torches of Freedom cigarette campaign and using Dixie cups as the only sanitary way to drink. Bernays thought this necessity of manipulation was dangerous because of the herd mentality. Do you ever consider your ham radio hobby as a parallel or maybe a rebellion against this discipline?
Oh, not really. No, I don't think there's any connection there in any way. Ham radio's more just talking to people around the country, and if you're lucky, around the world. Just rag chewing, they call it, and that's it. But I can't see any tie-in with ham radio and those theories. But I do remember in the 50s, when I was still going to art school in LA, there was the theories of subliminal advertising, where they'd sneak in a message to buy something or to get something, and I never saw any of that in the ad business. And also that was truth in advertising around then, where Campbell soup, they said they put marbles in there to make the soup look lumpier, and there was a few scandals like that. And I must say, when you present food, you do make it look nice as possible, but to portray your product, like using artificial means, was kind of verboten. But I think a little bit of that was done back in New York. But I remember painting bananas with spray paint. This is a confession, because you cannot find a banana that doesn't have black spots on it.
Do you have any remarkable accomplishments during your career?
Well, I don't know if you call them remarkable. There's always New York Art Directors Club would have an annual book that they would come out with outstanding ads of the year, and we got a few of our Olympia ads in there. Some of our Olympia commercials got some gold medals and things like that.
Was it your dream to become like something related to art? when you were a kid?
Yeah. I always was encouraged because I drew a lot. And then after I started school at Boulder, University of Colorado at Boulder, and I majored in fine art. And because I wanted to be an artist of some sort, but I didn't know about commercial art or fine art. I just wanted to take art and get on the path. I heard a little bit about painters being starving artists, but I didn't pay much attention. But then that's when the Korean War broke out, and I joined the Navy Reserve to stay out of the draft for a while, but then was called up. So I had all this time to think about it, career path. And I thought more and more about it, and I want to go. When I came back, I heard about this great school in Los Angeles that taught commercial art, automotive design, advertising design, and so I kind of said when I get out of the Navy, I'll try this school out. Plus, we had the GI Bill, which helped. That actually paid for the tuition, and so that was a good deal. So that was time well spent in the Navy.
What were you like as a kid?
What was I like? Adventuresome. I mean, we were always exploring, climbing trees, and fooling around. Every kid got a chemistry set at that time, and we were always making stuff in the chemistry set.
Like what?
Well, first thing you make when you get a new chemistry set is gunpowder. I mean, that's the first thing off the bat.
Really?
Yeah, we'd make gunpowder, and it was great fun. And stuff that would burn, then we want to maybe consider making our own rockets later on. and stuff that smelled. We liked stink bombs and things like that. But every kid loves doing that. But we spent half our life up in trees, and I grew up in Denver near the prairies, and we'd ride our bikes out into the prairies looking for Indian arrowheads and rattlesnake rattles. And I never found an arrowhead, but we found a lot of rattlesnake rattles. But that was it. So, and we all had .22 rifles, and we'd take it out in the country and try and shoot rabbits. Never got one.
Never,
not one. We'd shoot at them. We saw plenty of jackrabbits. Never got one. So
really?
Yeah.
Oh, or a prairie dog?
Yeah, prairie dogs are really quick. Yeah, we'd go out and try and...
But you'd never eat one of those?
No.
Those are diseased.
I don't know if we'd even eat a jackrabbit if we shot one, but we never did. We never got one.
What were your creative outlets when you were growing up?
Well, let's see. My mom was an amateur painter. She painted a lot of different things, and I kind of thought I'd try my hand at it. My first painting was an owl, but then I went a step further and put real owl's eyes or glass eyes on the painting. Actually, it was quite hideous, but my mom thought it was great. So it was terrible. I remember she showed a friend. She said, "Bill, show my friend your painting," and I brought it out, and I could tell by the look on the lady's face it wasn't. High school fraternities were illegal, and but this one was kind of had a religious overtone, and it was quite good, and I really liked that fraternity because it had a element of secrecy about it and so forth.
Really?
Yeah, I kind of like that.
And what was the name of it?
It was called Ta Sig. It was great. I loved it. I mean, they emphasized on morality, being a gentleman. In the Boy Scouts, there was a lot of code, you know, and I was interested in code. I never learned it. It was fascinating to me, and I thought it was really cool. You know, we did semaphore flags and all that, and I was just always interested in fooling around with magnets, and I kind of liked science as a kid anyway, and that was all part of it. So, well, I'll show you. As kids, every kid got one of these as a Boy Scout. There's a little telegraph key, and it would, this is an old one. It had a light in it, a buzzer, and a clicker. And we'd all wire up these things. We could wire from house to house if you had a buddy next door, and send secret signals at night, you know, after you go to bed. These were great, and it had the code on here.
But you didn't know the code. You would just emulate.
Yeah, just fake it. And we play spy games and that type of thing. This was like a handheld game to us.
Oh, really?
this was
that kept your attention.
Yeah, maybe for a half hour max. Then we go do something else. Handbands were restricted for use during the war, but, you know, shortwave radio was really an interesting subject for every kid in that time. So, yeah, in the 50s and 60s, there was a lot of hams, a lot of guys interested in hams and wanting to become hams.
Where would you meet those people besides the radio?
Let's see. Well, I met most of them on the radio, and I did look for a radio club, and I explored a couple of clubs in San Rafael, and actually in the church we were going to, one of the guys, he was Army sergeant, ex-retired, and he was into it. And he put out the call to anybody that was interested in becoming a ham, he'd teach a class. So that's what got me into it.
And did you learn CW and Morse code in the Navy?
I didn't. No, I got interested. I was interested in ham radio as a kid, and I saw a lot of the movies, you know, with spies, Nazi spies, and Japanese spies on submarine, and I always was fascinated with code. And on regular AM radios, you know, like in your living room, they had a section, you know, a shortwave section, and there was a lot of code on there, and I always wanted to know what they were saying. But I finally got around to it when I was around 40. I waited, you know, too many other things were going on, and I said, okay, I'm going to learn code, and I found an Elmer, they call him an Elmer, a guy that can help you out, you know, coach you. They're kind of like a coach. And I found a guy, and he said, you know, you learn code to get a license. You had to learn code to get a license. And so I had used flashcards. My wife would hold up a letter A, and I'd show her, you know, go dida. I learned it that way.
Really? And were you still working as in art then, an art director?
Yeah, I was still with an ad agency, and come home at night. Again, that was great to come home at night. It was another side of your brain you were using, and that was really relaxing to talk to people and code. It was great.
So do you think that was a form of stress relief from your work?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about it.
Was that what, you know, besides having inquisitive about code, do you think that was an attraction for you initially to get into ham radio?
Yeah, it was. But I've always been fascinated just by shortwave radio. You know, you hear all the foreign broadcasts, and you'd hear, you could actually hear spies on there. they called them number stations. So I was just fascinated tuning up and down the shortwave bands, and you know, and you could hear at that time, you could hear SAC, SAC, what's that? Strategic Air Command.
Really?
And they'd get on there with code words. They'd say, Democrat, Democrat, this is Outway, do not answer. And you could hear that on the radio, and it was fascinating.
I believe that the FCC requires that you keep your license with your station.
That's true.
And I don't see your license here.
Oh, I have it right here, right in somewhere. Got all my documents. But they didn't say it has to be visible. FCC Communications Commission, Algean Monitoring Station. Official notice of violation.
Really?
So, yeah, it says the facts set forth below. You have violated the requirements of law or treaty. This notice is issued in accordance of Section 1 of the Commission's rules. Within 10 days, you have to send a written answer in duplicate. Anyway, I was on 7163. I'll never forget it. It was Thanksgiving, 11/24/72.
Thanksgiving?
Yeah.
Somebody was observing you on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, they missed their turkey. They were back in Algean monitoring station in Michigan somewhere, listening. And they said, let's see, here's the violation. It was non-compliance with Section 97.7, operation outside the limits of the amateur band assigned to the novice class.
How could that have happened?
Well, because they changed the frequency allocation. Everybody changed, but I didn't get the word. Everybody else did but me.
What mode were you operating?
CW, of course. So, here's the log. They said, here's what we heard you saying. It's called CQ, CQ, CQ from W6KCK, W6KCK, W6KCK. CQ, CQ, CQ from W6KCK. K meaning go ahead and send. So I was sending out a CQ on the wrong band. That was funny. But, you know, those are scary to get because you think the feds are going to come and take all your gear away and fine you $10,000. And
it's even signed by multiple people.
Two guys. One guy is the issuing officer, and the other guy is engineer in charge. And it was.
I'm sorry. Did you say the first person was an official observer?
No, that was another guy. That was another incident.
Did you continue ham radio continuously, or did you ever take a break away from ham radio?
I got my novice license and got on the air. It was great fun, and I was surprised the code came quite easy. After that, it was more of a rhythm. You know, it was kind of fun, like playing the drums. But then you only had a license for 1 year, and if you didn't upgrade to technician or general, you'd lose your privileges. And there was a lot of theory in general, and a lot of formulas and mathematics. But I studied for it, and but at that time the test was administered by the FCC, and those were government guys downtown in a government building. And I got to thinking, you know, even though I was good at code and I was comfortable with it, I said, I'm going to freak out with those government guys, and they're not too friendly giving a test. So I skipped doing it. I just said, I'm not going to do it. I'll just drop my license, and I'll listen a lot. And I'll listen to code, and I'll copy code. And
it's quite an accomplishment, especially in contrast to today, where, you know, I put off getting my license for years just because, well, there was no good reason. You don't need code.
Yeah.
You don't need to go to a government office.
Right.
You barely need to study. Has ham radio taken you any places, or have you met any people that you wouldn't have otherwise, in your opinion?
Oh yeah, lots of guys. I met one guy on the air that was a British guy, and he happens to build the QRP rigs. And I told him I was a docent on the Pompano, and he said, "Oh, I'd love to go on the Pompano." So, charming guy, great guy. And
Really?
He's a super photographer, and he took a lot of pictures of the submarine, and we became friends. And he has the blog, you know, the great blog. Well, there was one guy, I've never met him personally, but he was a radio operator on a commercial cargo ship, and we talked to each other with 3 watts. No, it was a half watt power from a rock mite, or no, it was called a SMK, surface mount kit. It was a half watt, and we talked to each other all the way to his passage to Hawaii.
What do you think the best antenna is?
Well, I'm definitely not an antenna expert, but I think, well, from what I hear, you know, of course, Yagi antenna's quite efficient. The higher and the better, but it's so ugly. A lot of wives don't care for that thing stuck on their house. Personally, my antenna is a G5RV, which is supposed to be an all-band antenna.
Do you have a favorite band?
Yeah, 40 meters.
Why?
Because it's good in the morning, in early mornings, and then it's great the rest of the night. It kind of fades away around 10 o'clock. It goes silent. Or not silent, but there's not many people on. But then in the evening it's great. It's active all night long. Now, on 40 meters you can hear sideband pretty much all day. All the sideband guys are there during all day and in the evening. So that's a good all-around band.
Uh-huh.
And 10 meters is great fun, you know, when conditions are right.
What do you think of 11-meter band and its users?
Well, I started out, I bought a Radio Shack CB, and I thought it was great fun. And it was a early...
Was that before or after your ham license?
No, that was before, tell you the truth. And I thought it was a lot of fun. And you could talk to guys in the neighborhood and listen to truck drivers, and I had one in the car for a while, and it was fun until it got out of control. There was a lot of very lack of control, and there was a lot of what do you call them, ruffians say they were going to come to your house and cut your antenna or something. But it got out of control. There were so many people on the air talking at the same time, it just got so it wasn't that much fun. You know, they were out of control. And then later on, the guys started buying illegal amplifiers, and you know, they could talk across the country. You know, they buy 500 watt, 1,000 watt amplifiers and get on the air.
Have you ever thought to do CW on 11 meters?
No. I don't think I've ever heard any CW on 11 meters.
I just made that up. I thought maybe that'd be interesting.
No.
What do you consider your biggest accomplishment in ham radio?
Unusual contacts, like in my early days.
North Korea?
Yeah. Well, not North Korea, but I did talk to Korea. And he was on sideband. I could hear him talking. And I didn't have a transceiver. I just had the Heathkit, so I called him in CW, and he answered me back. And so we had a conversation. He was on sideband, and I was on CW. And we had a great QSO, and we confirmed it by email. That was a fun thing. I think the fun accomplishments are just the oddball things that that happen. You know, that I heard a guy that got me into low power radio was, I answered a call from Alaska, and he was running a it was called a peanut whistle, and that was only 1 watt power. And I said, gee, if I can hear him so well on 1 watt, you know, I've got to build some rigs like that.
What relevance do you think ham radio has in today's society?
Well, I think it's really it's a true hobby, and I think a lot of the ham operators are available for emergencies and like to think they can get on the air and continue communication, but you can still be friends with a guy in Cuba, with a ham in Cuba, and he'll send you a card, and so it still keeps some of the doors open, you know, and you can talk to a bunch of Russians, a couple of years the Russians participated in Freeze Your Butt Off Day. And they could do it over there. They could freeze their butts off and get on the air.
They can freeze their butts off every day, probably.
Get on the air. But there was a whole Russian team that, this was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years back, but that participated in that. So I think it's the idea. You could actually talk to a guy in North Korea if it was possible. He'd be a good catch. So it keeps conversations going between ordinary citizens rather than governments.
Say I'm not always this way. I better give up.